Sorry, I got somebody else said something there. It was the automated voice saying that the broadcast has now started.
Did you just start the broadcast?
I don't know. Well, I clicked on share my screen.
Ah, that's why. Okay. Uh,
You can undo that, can you? Or
I'll see.
oh, I can see I can stop recording. Should I do that?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I've done that. Yeah. It's theoretically I should be showing my screen, but I do see my screen now. Ah, Hannah's gone. Interesting. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you can all hear me, all of those who've joined the meeting. Just a second. Anna, do you hear me okay? Okay. I got a colleague with me in the neighbouring office and she's given me the nod, so it's good. Everyone can hear me. We'll just wait for a few moments until at least we get into double figures. We've got 8 attendees so far. Well, six plus 2 staff. Actually, Anna being staff, that means we've got 5 plus 3. So it's a small group for the moment. So we'll just wait a few more minutes and see if we get many more attendees, and then we'll get underway because I'd like to keep to time. Thanks. Okay, I think what we can do is actually get slowly underway. I see that the numbers haven't changed in the last couple of minutes. Just to, what we can do is actually just a short round of introductions because we're such a small group, and give you a chance to get familiar with the tool as well. I think you should be able to unmute yourself, but I can also unmute you if you have any problems there. Hopefully you can see my screen. I can make it full screen as well, and I can do cool things like highlight the text. So this is me over here. I've actually put the last slide up first so you can see who's talking to you. And Anna, my colleague, is in the neighbouring office. She's also with us. So I see that we've got Alexia from the Daphne Network in Greece, Anton Radnyanku from Interactia Foundation in Belarus, and then a couple of unknown names to me, Eleni Pharmaki, Octavio Zamudio, and Thomas Papadogiannis. Hope I got that right. They all sound rather Greek, those names. I hope I haven't got that wrong. So maybe Alexia, if you want to introduce yourself, perhaps, and if you can't unmute yourself, I can do it for you. Or maybe Anna, you want to introduce yourself first.
Okay. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Ruben. I represent CIVINET Secretariat and I work with Jerome. So in this procedure of applying for establishing a CIVINET, I would be happy to help you with any questions.
Thanks very much, Anna. Okay, Alex is raising a question, I think. Could you do it for me? Yes. I can unmute you. There we go, Alexia.
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay, so hello, dear all. On behalf of Daphne Network of Sustainable Greek Islands, we are here together with Kosmas Anastopoulos, the head of the Sustainable Mobility Department, for the interest for CIVINET Greece Cyprus.
Very good. Okay, thanks. So did I catch you well? You're here with Thomas and
Kosmas Anastopoulos.
Okay. So you have another colleague sat there with you.
Hi to all. Hi there.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much. Yeah, you can use this you know, you can raise a hand or you can put a question in the questions box here, and then I'll get a notification about that. So Anton, do you want to say hello? Okay, I got the raised hand. I'll unmute you. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Anton.
Yeah, hello. My name is Anton from Belarus Interactive Foundation. We're also working in the field of urban mobility and interest in this call.
Very good. Thanks very much for joining us. I'll unmute you. Eleni, would you like to say hello? I'll unmute you too. Okay, there you go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eleni. I'm from Crete Island in Greece. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, everyone? I don't.
Yourself. Okay. Okay, you can raise a hand or put a question in the chat box. Let's have a look. Let's see if I can see your question here. Sorry, I don't know if you could hear me. Yes, we did hear you for a moment there, but you muted yourself. Let's move on. I can hear that Octavio has unmuted himself.
Hello.
I don't know if that was an introduction, Octavio. I couldn't hear anything that you said. In case you said something there. Not very well. Very poorly. I just about hear you. Okay, the main thing is that you can hear me. That's the most important thing. We know that you're there and listening in. And then there's Thomas there who was introduced already by Alexia. Thomas, do you want to say hello?
Hello to everyone.
Oh, very good. Okay, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. That's fine.
I'm from Redmond Municipality.
Okay. All right, so we've got a...
From my kids.
Okay, so we have a couple of people from municipalities then. If I remember, Eleni is also from a municipality. Okay, good. I think let's get underway. I've just muted everyone, so if you want to say something, you can raise a flag, and then I'll unmute you, or you can put a question into the questions box. Let's get underway then. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's see if I can hide this. Okay. All right, so I'm going to spend about the next 90 minutes. Well, I probably don't need that long since we're quite a small group. It depends also on how many questions you have. Just explaining the stuff that you might already be quite familiar with, that is included in the materials that are posted on the CIVINET webpage. I'm going to also start recording this session now, so that anybody else who wants to listen in and couldn't make it today can pick that up via the Civitas webpage. So I'm going to explain the call for the new Civitas national networks, And this is the rough outline of the presentation. I'll give you some information about what the CIVINETs are to begin with, and then explain what the activity fund is about and what it is looking to support. And then with respect to your applications, those areas where, let's say, you can pick up extra points where we're looking specifically for link-ups with things like CIVITES projects and European Commission policies or other European Commission initiatives. And then I'll talk a bit about eligibility of the call, eligibility issues, and, if you like, selection criteria. And then I'll talk a bit about the documentation that is required to be submitted, the forms in a bit more detail, and then the evaluation process, so if you're familiar with how that works. Also the decision-making timeline, which is important information, how we expect to fund the networks that we support, and then redress issues, so in case anyone has a problem with a decision that we reach together with the European Commission, then there's an opportunity to put your concerns in writing about our decision making. I hope that we won't need that, as I'll explain to you a bit later on. We tend to quite closely engage with the networks in fine-tuning proposals in order to ensure that they are supported, or to ensure that as many activities as possible are ultimately supported. And then I've got some so-called frequently asked questions. Actually, there haven't been too many so far, but I pulled some from a previous presentation, because this is actually the second in a series of webinars that we're doing. It's not obvious here, but this is actually the second call of the CIVINET Activity Fund. The first one was for existing CIVINETs, and this particular call is for new CIVINETs. Don't hesitate to interrupt me if you've got a question. Either you can hopefully unmute yourself. It should be fairly obvious, and if not, you can raise a hand or post a question, and I'll unmute you so you can raise that question. I'm not 100% experienced with this toolkit, but it's not the first time I've used it, so hopefully we'll manage. Okay, then some information about the CIVINETs. These are groups of cities at national or sometimes regional level that share a common language. That's the principle, and the idea is that they are a tool for promoting the CIVITES approach that we see within the European network of cities, which is a European Commission initiative, and which exchanges best practice and shares experiences amongst the members. And the idea is to have the idea came up about 8 years ago now, to have national or regional network, CIVINET networks that are share common languages or cultural issues, and for them to exchange therefore information and experience at the sort of national or regional level. And as I've indicated up here, these networks are typically managed by a non-governmental organization or university or an association or a small or medium-sized enterprise. We don't have any cities typically leading CIVINETs, partly because the network is for cities, and so there would be one could imagine a kind of a conflict of interest there if a city would be actually serving as secretariat. I've actually indicated here on the right the existing CIVINET networks, and you can see that amongst all of these, in fact, just 2 are not managed by SMEs. All those that don't have red text beside them are managed by a small or medium-sized enterprise. The Spanish-Portuguese network is actually an NGO cum association, while the Polish CIVINET is managed by University of Krakow. But in all other cases, it's a small or medium-sized enterprise that runs the network. One of the things that the CIVINET, one of the values that the CIVINET provides to also the Civitas initiative and the European Commission is that it offers a mechanism for enriching and deepening European level discussions with national local perspectives. So in the same way as networks like Polis or Eurocities provide feedback to the European Commission on various policy initiatives, then the local CIVINETs also have the potential to provide the perspectives of cities within a country. I don't see that that angle or that aspect of CIVINETs being overly used so far. There's very small funding made available for the CIVINET networks currently, so they're kind of running on shoestring budgets, but that option is there for the Commission to hear national perspectives if the need arises. But otherwise, by and large, the bulk of the work of the CIVINET is to work with the Civitas Secretariat and to reach out to cities in the local language, which is something that the European Secretariat, which I am part of and Anna is part of, can't do so readily. So typically activities involve, as is written there, translating European Commission initiatives, activities and results into local contexts and languages. I don't mean purely translating, literally translating materials, but that also is part of the work of the CIVINET. Okay, we've been joined by a chap from Lithuania, although he's British, Jim McGeever. I think he's still setting up his microphone, but Jim is based in Kaunas in Lithuania. So welcome, Jim, if you can hear us already. I'll move on to what the Activity Fund seeks to accomplish. We did a survey of CIVINET members back at the beginning of the project, which is supporting this fund. It's called Civitas Satellite. It kicked off in July of last year. So we're about coming up to 18 months into the project, and we did a survey at the beginning of the project to find out what interests the CIVINETs and what sort of activities they would like us to fund. We're simply supporting activities. There was a predecessor project which had a larger role in supporting the CIVINET networks, in fact helping them to develop strategic goals and objectives and come up with a work plan. We're not doing that here in this case. We have very limited resources, so we're inviting you to let us know which activities you would like us to finance. Of course, in your case, I mean, you're new networks, so we also put in budget to support the establishment of three new networks, but the activity outline is pretty much the same as with the existing CIVINET. So these are the four kind of topic areas or priority areas based on the results of the survey of the existing CIVINETs as to where they would like, what sort of support they would like to see from the Civitas Secretariat. So essentially four categories: capacity building events, where your organization hosts a workshop or a seminar or a webinar to provide expert advice to members; transfer and take-up activities, where ultimately your members would host fellow members for a peer-to-peer exchange on a specific topic. That could be a site visit, for example, on I don't know, clean fuel vehicles or safety and security in public infrastructure with respect to public transport. It can include a study tour.
I can see only your last slide.
Oh, that's.
I don't know why, because I see only the last one with the picture.
People can see.
Maybe it's only my problem.
My colleague just let me know that you can't see my current slide. Just hold on a second, please. Oh, okay. Very good. Thanks, Anna, for flagging that. So let me just check that you haven't missed anything important there. Could you just a second? You saw that one? Okay. All right. Okay. So here we are on the activity fund. So these are the four categories of activity: capacity building events, transfer and take up activities where your members are involved in providing a service, let's say, to the other members. Civitas dissemination, where your organization is involved in preparing local language materials, postcards, or a local language version of Welcome to Civitas. It might be a roll-up or a newsletter, an electronic newsletter, or materials for e-courses, or content related to a specific thematic topic. Those of you who have had a chance to acquaint yourself with Civitas will know that Civitas structures its work, if you like, through 10 thematic categories, which either address policy or practical related issues like safety and security, or demand management systems, or clean fuel vehicles, or car-free lifestyles. So addressing different thematic topics, and there's more information about that under Civitas communities on the Civitas website, and we'll be keen to hear your ideas with respect to thematic groups. And then there's a fourth category, other activities, where your organization basically raises awareness of your network outside of the network zone and encourages cities with exchanges with cities beyond your region. So this can, for example, include attending a third-party event as a speaker or a participant. We see this kind of thing happening, let's say, for example, in the Southeast Europe network, where we had Slovenia and Croatia originally hosting the network, or as the scope of the, let's say, the West Balkan network, but because they share almost a common language with those in Bosnia-Herzegovina and in Serbia and Montenegro, there are grounds for CIVINET Slovenia, Croatia to be involved in raising awareness of their network beyond their their backyard, if you like. So events outside of their two countries, priority countries, their attendance of events to give a presentation to introduce the network, for example, could be supported. So there might be an instance where, I don't know, you have Lithuanian speakers, let's say, outside of Lithuania, that you might want to reach out to in neighboring territories. So this is the kind of thing that might be supported there. So those are the four priority categories. I'll move on, as I don't see any hands waving at me. We don't limit, let's say, the activities financed strictly, according to those the subtext next to those bullet points. We are, very happy if we will see a proposal within those four categories that that acknowledges any of these items raised on these bullet points. Obviously, activities realizing cleaner and better transport in cities is what we're aiming to do ultimately, but supporting the implementation, let's say, of the European Commission's low emission mobility strategy, or its so-called decarbonisation strategy, can be of interest to us. The web address is there if you're not familiar with that strategy. Activities which add value to the Civitas initiative's main assets: the forum network, which has got about 300 members, or the Civitas Forum Conference, which takes place annually, the thematic groups, as I've mentioned already, the Political Advisory Committee, or PAC it's called. Again, if you look at the Civitas website under communities, you'll see the so-called Political Advisory Committee listed there. And then where activities support the Civitas website and our communication tools, so that help to spread our message and our work, that help to lend weight to our work at the international level, at the local level, would be very much welcomed. And I'll come to how you can reflect that in your application form in a little while. And then, I mean, if there are activities that you propose to do that specifically support the implementation of the Civitas Forum Conference, which is an annual event, which is something that my team, together with the rest of the Civitas Satellite Consortium, organise. Now, the next forum will be in Torres Vedras in about 3 weeks' time, so there's obviously nothing to do there. But at the Torres Vedras event, we will announce who will host the next Civitas Forum Conference. It's pretty much clear to us already, but that will be announced at the Civitas Forum Conference, so not long before the deadline for the application. So if you see a role to play in supporting the implementation of that conference, then an activity that does that is also welcomed. Let me just check if there's a question there I missed. Somebody's asking me, probably Jim, I missed the first 15 minutes. What did I miss? Can you tell me whether this webinar is for already established networks or to support networks that want to set up? I can't see who that question came from, but oh yeah, I can see it now, Jim. Yeah, no, this is for, hi Jim, it's for new networks, for establishing new networks. It's not supporting existing networks. The existing networks have already been supported by Civitas Satellite. We had a call earlier this year that we closed, I think, at the end of February, and those contracts have been signed to support those 10 networks actually, or their members in June. So their work started in June. So this is the second call of the Activity Fund for establishing up to 3 new networks. There'll be another call for existing networks for those existing 11 networks in early next year. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll continue. I wanted to highlight the existing Civitas demonstration projects, the so-called innovation actions. There are 3 Civitas projects which we encourage you to consider linking up with in your applications, because experiences maybe in a neighboring country, or experts from a neighboring country could be brought in to share know-how with cities in your country. Ideally, I mean, the idea is that national expertise and know-how gets shared, but there are instances where an expert might be brought in from another project because they're doing something very similar to what you want to accomplish. Let's say you want to close a city centre, or to set up access restrictions, pedestrianise an area, or limit car traffic in a certain area, and there's a neighbouring city in a neighbouring country that has done something very similar, and you want to capitalise on that experience. So we're open to supporting that, and this is an overview of those projects which whose know-how you may wish to capitalize. And you can see that we've added here in the green circles the nature of those projects. So here we have urban freight and logistics, and you can see there are 4 projects in that sort of thematic category. There are research and innovation actions, that's what the RIA stands for, in the field of integrated planning and SUMPS, Sustainable Urban Mobility Planning, and there are 4 projects, Sunrise being a recent addition. Moving from conventionally fueled vehicles, there is a project called Elliptic in that area, and then there's another category here, tackling congestion, and there are 4 projects here. And then over here, mobility management, soft measures, if you like, planning. You have 2 projects, and Move is a new recent addition as well. And you can see here the link where you can find a little bit more information about these projects and links to their websites. The Commission has a program called Civitas, which supports Civitas demonstration activities, but research and innovation actions under Horizon 2020 now also receive a Civitas label, which is why there are many more related Civitas projects under this banner, where there are also actually some demonstration sites as well. So if you can link up with cities involved in those projects, or with those projects, that's good. I'll give you, to make it a little bit easier, just some information about which cities are involved in those projects. This is basically copy-paste from an Excel sheet, so I'm sorry it's not very attractive, and it's not the most up-to-date because 2 new projects were added to this community since this Excel sheet was last updated. But here on these 2 slides, you can see countries and cities that are involved. Now, I appreciate that for most of you, perhaps cities far away from your countries aren't going to be very useful to you. There's a couple here from Lithuania, and you can see that there's a couple of cities from Greece, although obviously Development Agency Athens is not a city as such, but Athens is partly involved, and here also Thepta. And then on the next slide, I've got a continuing list here. these are the cities that are involved in this current phase, and the projects. You can see the project titles here. So with that information, you can go to the website over here and look up those projects, or you can contact us and ask us to pass you the contact details of somebody in a city, in a particular city, if you don't have that already. As I said, this info sheet does not include the MOVE and the Sun. I can't quite read that. Sunrise project, but the web page has been set up for those, and there's some basic information on the Civitas web page here. So feel free to have a look at that. Okay. Some remarks about eligibility. If there are no questions, let me just check the list. Okay. No, just to come back to you, Jim, there were always some small funds set up for establishing new networks. I'll come to how much money there is available. It's not a lot, actually, but it was always part of the satellite contract to support the establishment of three new networks. You can see here the amounts under the eligibility category. We're looking at, we've got about €30,000 overall to support 3 new networks. So that means obviously 10 or 11,000 euro per network. It's not a lot of money, but you can maybe squeeze 5, 6 activities out of that sum, where each is, maybe €1,500 or €2,000. It's small funding. You can apply for more than that amount, but obviously we're shooting for that amount so that every network gets an even share. The applications, your applications. Coming from, as I said before, either an SME or an NGO association or a university, should be supported by your potential members, so namely cities. And what we do see in some networks is one particular city getting involved as a so-called national network manager to help sort of liaise and ensure the city perspective is well understood by the secretariat, by the eventual secretariat. And a couple of examples there include, for instance, in Hungary, where we have an NGO or actually an SME as the secretariat, but the city of Szeged is involved as the national network manager, and they have resources obviously to somehow keep the communication, the dialogue going with the city members when, let's say, the secretariat is short on funding, for example. Also in the UK, Southend Town Council is involved as the national network manager for the UK network, which is in an interesting situation because the secretariat for that network basically was absorbed into a larger company which doesn't have the resources to devote to CIVINET UK. So in fact, UK Ireland network is in a sort of somehow dormant status, but I'm in touch with the city of Southend to somehow see how we can keep the network going with them as network manager. I've put a box here reflecting on European Mobility Week. I think most of you know what the campaign is about, so I won't say too much there, but if you follow this link, you will see the participants in this year's campaign. We're getting close to 2,000 participants. It looks like it's going to be another record year, and you can see at that web address a list of countries and the numbers of participants. When you click on the country, you get the names of all of the cities who are actively involved, and then when you click on a city, you can see the contact person. So I think it's a good idea. Certainly the Commission is keen to encourage links between Civitas and Mobility Week. It's a good idea if you get in touch with those local coordinators and set up a dialogue with them and gauge their interest in being part of a CIVINET for your country, or for your language region, and ultimately to encourage them to pass you a letter of support to support your application. some of us, some of you, and some of my colleagues have raised the question about eligibility for applicants from non-EU countries or third countries, and the Commission to this point hasn't come back with any clarification. When I say the Commission, I mean INEA, the Innovation Networks and Projects Executive Agency that supervises our contract. They haven't said that certain countries are ineligible. So for the time being, we assume that interest from Belarus or from Ukraine or any other country outside of the EU within Europe remains eligible for the call. If any information comes to my attention about this in the next few weeks, obviously I'll share it with yourselves directly. But till now, and since we prepared the call, we've not heard this from the Commission. Some of the satellite partners did raise a concern and suggested we check that, double check that with the Commission, because they didn't flag that when we announced the call. There's a sort of a timeline here, but I'll come back to this in a bit more detail in a moment on a subsequent slide. Let me just check the questions box, see if anything has arisen. No? Okay, I'll move on to the documentation. You can download the form and the supporting documentation from this web address if you haven't done that already. I'll take you briefly through some of the main points of the documents. There's an application form. You can see the first page of it here over on the right-hand side. There is an annex. It's an Excel sheet that you'll append to the application form, which gives you the opportunity to go into more detail about each activity that you would like us to support and the corresponding budget. There's an instruction sheet to help explain in a bit more detail how to fill it in case it's not completely obvious. There is also a sample form and then an activity reporting template that we will ask you to fill in basically once the activity has been completed in order to pass you the second installment related to your costs. We are in the process at the moment of setting up a simple reporting tool for monitoring activities as they're implemented by the network. This is so that my colleagues within Civitas Satellite have information about what you're up to once funded and how we can convey that information over the Civitas webpage, and that would be a quarterly Excel. I haven't put that into this presentation because we're still determining the best format for that. Okay, somebody would like me to maybe unmute them. Let me see who's raising that question. It's not clear who would like me to unmute them. Just bear with me. Okay. Well, I can. I don't know who wanted to raise the question. I can unmute Jim because he hasn't muted himself, but Eleni and Alexia, if you wanted to raise a question, I think you have to unmute yourself. I can't seem to do it here.
Hello, Jerome. Alexia here. Should we pose questions right now or wait for you to present the whole application form and pose them in the end?
No, it's okay. If you can manage to grab my attention while I'm presenting, you can interrupt me and ask questions. Now, I'm trying to keep an eye on the dialogue box, but since you've got the floor, I mean, you can ask your question now.
Okay, that's a small detail actually. So we have a letter of support of most of the municipalities that support the CIVINET ciphers. And however, for some of them, we have written evidence, but not in the form of letter of support. Should we take it also in this form?
Yeah, I saw your question. You raised this question back in July, and I've got a slide later on with which summarizes frequently asked questions. I mean, an email is fine if you've got that. I mean, that's better than nothing. Ideally, a letter of support signed by the mayor or a councillor, supporting your secretary is even better. I mean, what is important for us is to see that not just that. I mean, there are a bunch of cities that that could be supported from your perspective, but that they actually confirm their support for your leadership. So an email is fine. A letter of support and a formal template is even better.
Okay, perfect. And I think that later on you have it in the schedule to present the time frame of the selection process. So I can wait for that for later. A question concerns the budget scenarios for the activities funded by this initial establishment fund. So we have a plan of activities. However, we have a scenario that these activities, such as workshops, will be funded also by some other resources. So in our application, should we present, let's say, those scenarios differently?
I guess it's very tricky. I mean, I would put in a reasonable estimate for the activity until you know that it's co-financed by another source. So put in for the whole amount that you're seeking. Obviously, keep it reasonable and within the frames of the overall budget. And if until we would contract you, information might change, circumstances might change, then we have room to modify the annex to the agreement. Even after the contract has been signed, we have already an instance of a budget modification, but that's a budget neutral modification. So it's better to try and get this sorted out before we sign the contract.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? If not, then I'll continue. We're about 40 minutes into the webinar, and I plan another 50 minutes. We've got a budget of 50 minutes, but I'm almost halfway through my slides, so we're doing quite well. If we move on from the form, you can see on the opening page of the form here is basic information about your organization. It's a good idea to append to your application further information about your organization in terms of its profile, in terms of the activities that renders it relevant to be leading a network of cities. Some project references maybe where you've worked with a group of cities, or where you've led a group of cities, whatever size of community and whatever size of city, so that we it helps us to understand who we're dealing with here and why you are, let's say, more relevant than another applicant. We don't suppose, and we're trying to discourage multiple applications from one country, but of course it could happen. And in that case, it's good to see, why you would be more relevant than, let's say, another network. So, please help us to understand what makes you the suitable network secretariat. Here is the remainder of the application form, pages 2, 3, and 4. Section 3 is an important one, because this is where you tell us about the potential of the network, and you'll see that we don't want really more than 3 pages, but we put some bullet points there that will help you to explain to us why your proposed CIVINET has potential in your geographic area. And so you can talk about the critical mass of Civitas demonstration cities or Civitas forum members in the geographic area. I mentioned already Mobility Week cities, the context, so the common language zone, the total number of cities, so what potential exists to grow the network over time, the economic circumstances in the country, let's say, as well. The potential city members, where, what grounds there are to grow them, not only to grow the network, but to found the network. And here I've indicated letters of support may be included in Annex 1, which is something that you'll just annex. It's up to you what number you give it. Tell us something about the network's longer term objective. Obviously 10,000–11,000 euros is going to support you only for an 18-month period or so. what are your longer term plans once that funding dries out? I mean, how are you going to sustain the network in the longer term? That's the kind of thing we would like to hear, because European Commission might be able to support CIVINET networks in the future, but you should also, let's say, look at maybe national sources to assist the network's continuation. And then I've mentioned here already as well the role of a national network manager, i.e. a city. So you can indicate here below on page 2 if a city is looking to support you as national network manager and give us their information. Then in section 4, you can describe your activities. Here, you only need to describe them very briefly. What we will do to set up the contract with you is to annex the Excel sheet, which will have the more detailed information about the activities and the budget. That's what's going to be annexed to the contract that we set up, not the application form. I see a question. Let me just bring that up. Do you have examples from other networks of how they have become self-sustainable? If none have so far, who can help the networks to gain this experience? Yeah, probably it's not really, not ideally. In most cases, as I mentioned, I think in the second slide, I think 8 out of 10 networks are actually small and medium-sized enterprises that have other business activities through which they sustain their work, and through those activities they are able to somehow manage on a shoestring to communicate with members when CIVINET funding is not there. Krakow University obviously has a kind of a core budget line, as does the NGO Come Association, the CIVINET Spain and Portugal, because they're affiliated with the university community, Jose Maria Diaz. So there aren't really, I think the UK made a strong effort to set up a really sustainable network. They had membership fees and they published a newsletter and so on, but the company that managed that network, TRL, were subsequently bought up by a larger transport consulting company who said from the beginning they don't have the resources to basically volunteer to lead the network. So UK and Ireland is in a sort of a dormant phase. So there aren't to this stage great examples of networks managing to sustain themselves, and I know that the European Commission is aware of this, and it has been discussed in the political advisory committee of the Civitas initiative. But I think it works both ways. We're looking to see how networks can come up with like a business strategy for supporting themselves, alongside seeing what potential exists to support it from the European Commission or from national sources, in the same way as the European Secretariat is supported by the European Commission. Maybe national secretariats can be supported by national funding sources. Okay, in section 5 of the application form, then you can see, you can provide some very basic information about the budget, but again here we're essentially referring to the annex to the Excel sheet which you'll submit with your application, and I'll come to that in just a moment. Here then a declaration from the applicant and from the national network manager that you're submitting this application. Here is the Excel sheet. I've tried to blow it up as large as possible. This is actually a sample from the sample form, so you can take a look at that in more detail. But you can see here the activities are numbered on the left, 1 row please for each activity that you're proposing. You can see the activity type. You remember the 4 categories I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation and also in the application form. So indicate which activity you're seeking funding for, and then provide some details about the activity, just briefly, whether it's a one-day workshop or an exhibition stand at a conference or a visit, a site visit, and what you plan to do there, or a study tour and so on and so forth. The proposed date, if you don't know the exact date, that's okay, you can say a month, but please have an idea about the month, because the timeline is not so great, and we're assuming that you have a clear sense of what you want to be doing within your activity proposals. So give us a month, indicate the expected number of attendees, the likely audience, the relevance of the event, why you want to be doing that. You can also indicate on the right side the foreseen impact. Again, examples are here. Obviously, one of the aims is to build capacity if you're going to be doing a site visit, maybe to help a city to realize a strategy on cycling, or maybe it's to recruit new members for the network. Under here, value, I'm sorry it looks a bit ugly this, but I just realized this last night. What we want to see here is you linking up with those aspects of Civitas, the Civitas Secretariat's work, the forum network, the conference, the thematic groups, or the political advisory committee, and the Civitas communication tools. So please indicate here in value where you see a contribution to each of those, either of those four categories. It need not be all of them, but this is the place to indicate that in the value field. The second page of the Excel sheet then is your budget detail, and in the same way, please put your activity on the left column. And if you have multiple budget needs for an activity, then just insert a new line here. You can see that activity 2, for example, everything fits here, but here under activity 1 we've added an extra line for an extra item under other costs, and that's typically where you'll find that you have to add extra lines. I've put a couple of notes here. Basically, this is the structure: staff costs, travel tickets, hotel costs, subsistence and catering costs, and then other costs over here on the right hand side, and then the overall budget will sum from the formulas in the Excel sheet. You don't have to necessarily indicate person months, because I appreciate that for an activity you probably will spend 3, 4, 5 days on organizing an event, not 0.2 person months. You can express it in person months, but you can change this to person days and a daily rate. It might be easier actually than dealing with decimals. You just change the header there. And over here, what we noticed with the previous round was that sometimes we had 2 people claiming hotel costs, but many more travelers, for example, over here. So it turned out that in some cases, some travelers were being put up at acquaintances' households, or maybe it was the other way around, and we had a couple of travelers, but we had many more people staying in a hotel. Just please insert a comment inside the cell so that we understand what is the background, why there is a difference when these numbers don't match up in terms of travelers and hotel guests. That'll save us asking subsequently. Over here, you can put the other direct costs, like the printing costs, or a conference fee, or equipment, or a venue to host an event, a speaker, a foreign speaker, or maybe a translator as well, if you bring a foreign speaker who doesn't speak the language of the network. Eleni, I think you had your hand up there. Let's see if I can unmute you. You have to unmute yourself if you want to take the floor. I can't do that here. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have a question. I don't know what it keeps.
Oh, I see.
I don't know why. Sorry.
All right. Okay. I don't know why it does that either.
I don't notice that until you say it. Sorry.
All right. Okay. At least it proves I'm paying attention. Good. That covers, I think, the budget. You can see here an example of or several examples of how to put it together. So I think I don't need to explain more there. This is an overview of how we evaluate it. There is a team of 3 of us that will evaluate the applications. It's REC, it's Polis, and Eurocities, two city networks. Polis is the coordinator of Civitas Satellite, and Eurocities has a role in our task. And essentially, what we're doing is scoring the activities from two different perspectives. One is the financial perspective, the dark blue cells here, and the lighter blue cells here are the content related. The relevance and impact of each proposed activity in section A, and what we're doing is scoring it basically out of 20. We're each scoring it. We share the applications, and we put together a score out of 20 for the relevance and impact. And you can see this sort of scale that we have here. 0 to 5 will be accorded if there's insufficient information for us to be able to make a decision, or 6 to 10 if there's insufficient information to be able to understand the relevance or anticipated impact is not realistic. Above 11, which is a threshold score to be considered eligible for funding, realistically explains the relevance and impact of the activity, but could be more ambitious. And 16 to 20 is obviously it's very clear, and there are links, let's say, with the Commission's low emission strategy. And a similar approach with the financing aspect. If the budget is poorly justified, then it will score it somewhere between 0 and 5, and if everything is clear with the budget to accomplish the activity, then a score of 6 to 10 will be accorded. And then we'll simply average the score to get a total average score. And what is important is that the activity exceeds the threshold to be considered eligible for funding. Now, if you don't quite make the grade, it's not the end of the world. What we'll end up doing is coming back to you and asking you for further information to understand more about what you envisaged, and basically to get more details. If something's rather too vague in your application, we'll look to make that as specific as possible, so we can put that into the contract, because the Excel sheet that I showed on the last two slides is what we're going to annex to the contract. What we'll also do is look at the value added to the Civitas forum network, as I said, using the content of the value column in the activity application form. And this doesn't have a direct bearing on the score, but we'll look at whether an activity is a high or a low value. This is, like I said, more to make sure that the colleagues are aware what activities are being undertaken that relate to the thematic groups or the Civitas Forum Conference, so we can link up your activity with those activities. If the application and the activity exceeds the threshold, then we put that forward for final ranking, and we get an overview then of which activities can be funded. I think only a few activities in a couple of the networks ultimately from the previous call were not funded, partly because they're ineligible. Some of the networks wanted to send their members on a study visit to Italy. I think let's say Croatia, Slovenia wanted to send some study members on some city members on a site visit to Italy. That's the kind of thing that we're not funding. When we do it, when we're supporting a site visit, then it will be within your own country, because the idea is to exchange information within the network, not beyond the network. When you want to learn about a city beyond the network, then there are other mechanisms for supporting that. For example, through satellite, we have a staff exchange program and site visit supporting fund, and I think there'll be 4 calls of that program, and one has already been completed and is about to get underway. So there'll be another one, I think, announced within the relatively near future. The timeline, this is to address Alexia's question. So your submission deadline is October the 6th. It's a few weeks away, just under a month away. Then we'll do the scoring of that by November the 13th, myself and our colleagues. And then what we'll do is have a telco between ourselves on November the 21st. Then we'll get back to the to yourselves with any comments and questions from our side by November the 31st. We'll share the results at that same day. Sorry, we'll share the feedback by around about November 21st, and then ask you to firm up your applications by November the 31st. And then we'll share the final outcomes with the whole Civitas satellite team, and also send those to the European Commission shortly afterwards by December the 8th, with a view to basically requesting, I mean, basically what we're doing there is requesting their approval of the proposals after it's been screened and developed by us. And then we hope by December 22nd to announce the final, to give you basically a final confirmation that we're ready to support your network, and then we'll proceed to contracting. And it's a tricky period because the REC is, I mean, like most organizations, shut down for a couple of weeks over the Christmas period, but we would hope to have by January 15th contracts signed and sent out to yourselves for co-signature, with a view to starting the activities on February the 1st. We managed to keep a similar timeline for the existing CIVINET under the first call, so it should be realizable. Obviously, since we will have three networks here as opposed to 10 from the previous call that are being supported. A bit of information about the funding modalities. What we'll do is issue a prepayment of 50% following the contract signature. So you'll invoice us for half the amount of the total contract, 5,000 euros, something like that, and then we'll issue the final payment following the approval of the activity report. So once you send us the report within a month after completing the activities, the last activity, then we'll submit these, or make the transfer of the second payment against an invoice from yourself. It has to be an original invoice, although we can start the process with an electronic invoice, and you'll need to share with us copies of expenses that have been incurred. It's actually, to be honest, I'm not sure that you need to photocopy every bill, but what I will say is that since the Commission and INEA carry out third-party audits up to 2 years after the final payment has been made, so that means after Civitas Satellite ends, which is in December 2020. So for 2 years after then, you could be audited by the Commission for the money that you receive from Civitas Satellite. So you need to retain all original invoices with VAT numbers on them from experts or from venues that you've hosted an event at, for which you've paid a bill, for travel tickets, receipts, pay slips, timesheets, these kind of things. It's good to keep all that information as up until 2022. Sounds a bit arduous, and I don't suppose that any of the CIVINET networks will actually get audited, but it is in our grant agreement that can happen, so you need to be aware and prepared for that. Also be ready to present your methods of overhead calculation. If you notice from the Excel, you can actually apply to the fund with workday rates as opposed to simply salary costs, so it means that some overhead can be counted for your organization within a daily rate that you would charge to us or put within your application, but you need to show how that overhead rate has been calculated. You can't subcontract a third party. There is no, because we will subcontract you, you can't then in turn subcontract somebody else. So if a potential network member wishes to host fellow members for a peer-to-peer exchange or a site visit or something like that, then be prepared to basically receive an invoice from, let's say, the city, or from a hotel, which is not too difficult, or from whoever is helping locally to support the activity, and make sure that you budget for that in your Excel sheet, in your application. As I said, the invoices that they submit to you should ideally have a VAT number on them, a VAT number, value-added tax number on them, so that we can show full accountability there. as I said, we will subcontract you, and so we'll need to also ask you to submit an ID sheet. It's actually annexed to the application form, and you can just see here an example. The top of the form, I've just highlighted the top part of the form, which is what we'll need you to fill in. Name of the organization, address, the tax registration number, homepage, bank details, and scope of activity, and your offered rate. And as I said here, as I said already, please add some information about your organization and reference projects, so we know that the network is in safe hands with you. If you're not happy with the result, you can put your complaint in writing and indicate the following things. I mean, obviously, who's complaining, which is the activity that you're not happy with the decision over, and the reason why you're not happy with that decision. And you can address that to this email address on January 2nd, so sometime after you've received the decision on December 21st, and then we'll try to get back to you with an answer by January the 8th. We didn't need this in the previous round of CIVINET applications, chiefly because we continue the dialogue once the application has been received up to the point of contracting, and we didn't receive any objections. So essentially we're here to help and to support you in your work. In parallel, we'll continue to negotiate all other contracts in case a concern does arise. So that won't delay the process of contracting the other CIVINET applicants. If there is a real problem, then we'll just continue with the other CIVINETs and continue to work to resolve the problem with you if you're not happy. Coming then to some of the questions that were raised. The time is 12:10, so we've got about 20 minutes left. This was a question which I've already addressed during the webinar. Oh, sorry, that was the second question here regarding letters of support from municipalities and academic institutions. Is there a template? No, there isn't a template. An email is okay, but as I said, a letter of support can look better and can be more convincing. We also had a question, can the lead applicant assemble a consortium of players? I think the answer is hopefully fairly obvious. With the resources being so limited, it doesn't make sense to stretch them amongst different players. Obviously, there will be a chance for a city to be reimbursed for its activities, but the city should not be part of your consortium unless they're coming in as network manager. But typically, the national network manager doesn't have a budget line, a separate budget line as such. We will only sign a contract with the lead partner. So if a network manager is going to receive some resources, then it's going to be as part of a specific activity rather than a budget per se for simply managing or co-managing the work of the CIVINET. And that's the same even with the lead partner. You will have to find a way to make sure that running costs of the secretariat are somehow discreetly budgeted into each of the activities that you propose. There might be an extra half a day here or some hours there for kind of network management, but essentially we're looking to support activities rather than the running costs of the secretariat. You can't just put in an activity running the secretariat. Everything everything that we disperse is for specific activities along the lines of those categories illustrated at the beginning of the presentation, which you can see in the application form. These were some questions that came from the other networks when we did the previous webinar and the previous call. I've indicated which networks submitted those. Regarding the subcontractor ID sheet, general account details, you don't have to create a new account and treat this fund like a new project. So your existing account is fine. What does the offered rate mean exactly? That's over here. That's basically your workday or fee rate. Might not be as high as that, but it can stretch up to that in some organizations' cases or some consultancies' cases. I think maybe the Netherlands reached that kind of level. Subcontractor qualifications, I've mentioned this just in the previous slide, so please indicate why you are a suitable secretariat. Do you have to include CVs? No, you don't have to include a CV. If you want to, you can, but it's not essential. Hungarian CIVINET, there's no regulation concerning the calculation of rates, but they should be realistic. Especially because of the potential for an audit. Does the daily rate given on a qualified subcontractors form have to be in line with the monthly rate? Yes, obviously there should be a correspondence between what you put in your budget and what is indicated on the subcontractor ID sheet. Do you have to give all the topics in advance of the foreseen workshops? Yes, obviously we want to have we want to see that you have a clear idea what you want each seminar that you're looking to organize is going to be about, and you still have time to reach out to members to find out what potentially they'd be interested in if you want to submit a proposal for an event. How flexible is the budget during implementation? I mentioned that we've already done one amendment. We don't really want to be doing amendments. In the particular case, I think an Italian city said that basically the forum venue expenses that they had foreseen wouldn't materialize because because they got the venue for free. Let's say it was a city hall, but the moderator that they were looking to engage or the speaker was charging a higher price than they had envisaged. So would it be okay to move the €400 for the venue rental over to the speaker's moderator? So we said yes, that's not a problem. So what we did was reprinted the annex, a couple of copies, initialed it, mailed it to the CIVINET, and asked them to sign both copies, send us one back, and also send us back the original annex to the contract so that we could dispose of it, basically. So that's the way it'll work. Otherwise, when it comes to the end of the contract, if you don't claim as much money as you have been awarded, then obviously we'll not give you reimburse you the whole amount. But your claim shouldn't go above, obviously, what is the maximum contracted amount, and we don't envisage changing that during the course of the contract. So that's what we sign eventually as the overall contract amount is the amount that you can ultimately receive from us. Yes, please sign the subcontractor identification sheet when you submit that with your application. And this was a question that had come from the Spanish and Portuguese network, whether two networks could apply together for the organization of one event or course. Let's say they both looking to support the event by supporting their members to participate in the event. I think as long as the two networks coordinate that, it is possible. Now, I did mention already that a site visit to another country would typically fall under a separate program line of Civitas Satellite, so this would be the exception rather than the rule, I think, where two networks would jointly apply to organize one event. And it would have to be well justified why you would have, let's say, I don't know, the German network and the Italian network supporting an event in a German-speaking region of Italy. That might be an example where you would see perhaps collaboration occurring, but suffice to say, actually, we didn't see any joint applications from two different networks for the same event. It's probably more trouble than it's worth to set that up. So better to focus on events in your country, which is the point of the network ultimately, or an event within your region if you're looking to work with cities and towns outside your country, but which are members because they speak the same language as your network does. That's basically all I wanted to share with you. Once we have signed those contracts, we will set up an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, or actually I think in the end we called it a letter of intent, because an MOU ran into some legal problems with some partners. It sounds a bit more formal. A letter of intent is just to basically underline what the Civitas Satellite Project and the CIVINET Secretariat commits to support you with. once we've signed a contract, we'll invite you, for example, to the Exchange Hub, which is an online communications platform for all the CIVINETs to exchange information. We don't see a lot of traffic there, but you can also set up your own we can set up for you your own national platform on the so-called Civitas Exchange Hub, if that is so required, and we'll share information about that once we have gone through the contracting process. So as I said, hopefully by January 15th of next year, it'll be clear who we're supporting and what we're supporting, and then we can work together with you to really embed you into the Civitas network formally. Thanks very much for your attention. I've done a lot of talking. The floor is certainly open if anyone has any more questions. Or you can use the chat box. So just bring that up so I don't miss anything. I don't see anything currently. I guess everything was clear to folks. Jim, I'll unmute you, I think. You can ask a question, then we can hear you as well, and everyone else can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, if the call is for newly to be in newly established networks, then it's by definition only a selection of countries could apply.
Right.
Okay, so so you would expect from those countries that are not already partners to be applying if possible. How many does that leave you with out of the 28 member states?
Let me just try to rewind back to almost my opening slide where you can see the existing networks. Here you can see those that have been established, and we don't have a map version of that, but basically areas where we don't have networks: Scandinavia, the Baltic countries, Greece, and well, the neighborhood countries, the European Union's neighborhood countries like Ukraine, Belarus. Moldova theoretically can be considered part almost of the CIVINET Romania network. Yes, Romania is not there actually. That's because they were established just before the previous call back in October, November last year. So Romanian speakers are covered by CIVINET Romania. I think that's basically it. That's the only gap on the map. And well, Western Balkans, which Slovenia, Croatia is sort of addressing. I have not heard of any interest for Albania, Kosovo, and again, I mean that's beyond the EU in the neighbouring countries, but they are part of the stabilisation and accession process, so they theoretically could be more eligible, let's say, than Belarus or Ukraine.
Okay, so you've got about 30,000 to set up. So you've got enough to cover 3 new missing outstanding networks to be set up: a Scandinavian, a Greek, and the Baltics.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes, yes. You know, the notion is a common language underpins the CIVINET network. So with the Baltics, it's a bit tricky because I realised that, I mean, Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuania, they're all pretty much separate languages. There's not really a common tongue there. With I think Sweden and Norway, I think they can sort of understand one another, or some Finns in Sweden also, but or some Swedes in Finland, but we have not heard any interest actually from the Scandinavian region in this call, although initially there had been some, but...
Okay, all right, that's good, thank you.
All right, welcome. Anybody else? I don't see or hear anyone. Anyone else? Anyone else asking any questions? So hopefully that was basically clear to everyone. As I put here on the last slide, you can see our email address is there. Some of you have already been in touch with us over this call. Accommodation is running out, but I think the Civitas Forum conference is a good chance to attend the to raise further questions or to talk to potential members. Alexia, I can see you've got a question, so I've unmuted you, so you should be able to unmute yourself now. Yeah, there you go.
Hello, Jerome. Actually, my questions were covered regarding the timeline, so I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay, fine. Good. Well, I think I've talked enough and shared enough information, so I'll leave it there if that's okay with everyone. Yeah, as I said, it would be great to meet you at the Civitas Forum conference. You can use the occasion to do a bit of lobbying as well as speak to cities that you know are from your country. We will have a special feature on European Mobility Week there, so I'll be raising the profile of European Mobility Week. I'm also involved in that secretariat, so and talking about cities' involvement there. So I can put you in touch with Mobility Week cities as well, or national coordinators if that helps. Okay, thanks very much for participating and for your attention, and I'll leave it there. Have a great afternoon, and look forward to receiving your applications. Thank you very much, Alexia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleni. Thank you, Thomas.